What is up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast presented by Oakridge Ford in London. OakridgeFord.com. Employee pricing ends September 30th. Get in while the deals are good. I'm Norman James with Mike Geldo. The Maple Leafs, a 5-3 loser at KeyBank Arena on Saturday night. The 2019 preseason continues on, and I don't think we have a clear picture yet of which players will be the key players on October 2nd when the Leafs line up with the Ottawa Senators to start the regular season. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Norman. Mike Babcock after the game yesterday was not pleased with, well, especially the defense. He did not like the effort last night. There were some gaffes. There was not some good performances from some of the candidates for the bottom pairing job. Muzzin and Barrie, even though they had a few defensive faux pas, played fairly well, but nobody of Jordan Schmaltz or Kevin Gravel or Ben Harper really stood out, and that is going to make Babcock's decision a little more difficult because the options then go to more the group that played on Friday night against the Sabres, and one of them includes 19-year-old Rasmus Sandin, and I think if all things were being equal, they would have preferred for Sandin to play some time in the AHL, but he right now is one of the best defensemen in camp, and he may make the team based on that.
Is he our new Luke Schenn, Mike?
And that's the concern. I mean, you're joking, but you're also right. It's the fact that, like, in the past, we've had I'm talking about the past, like when I was a kid, the Gary Nylans, the Ali Afraitis, the Jim Bennings, who were high first-round picks, who were inserted into the league at 18 or 19 years old when they weren't ready. Luke Schenn was 18 years old. And I think playing him that young when he wasn't fully formed and ready affected his career. Now, Sandin, he played in the AHL last year. He played very well. He played very well in the Calder Cup playoffs. I think he had 10 assists. He's very calm. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, a lot of the players have been talking about, his demeanor and how they think he can handle it at such a young age, and even Babcock has mentioned that. But I think the plan is still not to play him this early. But again, I mean, right now, I think if the preseason ended right now, your bottom pairing would probably be Rasmus Sandin and Martin Marincin, and that's not ideal.
Well, is Martin Marincin the partner you want to have helping usher a player like Rasmus Sandin into the league? Is he the guy? Mike, I would almost want to keep Sandin away from anyone like a Marincin. You bring in your young star defenseman who you have big hopes and dreams surrounding, and you want to pair that young player with someone who can show them the ropes, someone they can count on, rely on, not only off the ice, but certainly on the ice. How would Martin Marincin benefit? How would playing with Martin Marincin benefit Rasmus Sandin in any way, shape, or form?
The thing is that they played together with the Marlies last year during the playoffs at times. Marincin is, for lack of a better term, more of a stay-at-home defenseman, and Sandin carries the puck the majority of the time and makes good decisions. So, as long as you don't have to have Marincin anywhere near the puck or carrying it up in the zone, that's a benefit. Plus, Marincin, even though he's a left shot, can play the right side. Now, Sandin played the right side in one game, but I think ideally they want him playing the left. And I think Marincin, unfortunately, is going to make the team at least early on until Travis Dermott comes back, because they need him on the penalty kill. It looks like right now, the way things are going, that the penalty kill tandem, the number one tandem, replacing Zaitsev and Hainsey, will probably be Muzzin and Cody Ceci. And now you're asking for those players who are in the top four to play heavy penalty killing minutes. That probably amps up their ice time to 23, 24 minutes a night. So ideally, you would like a bottom pairing guy who could play on the penalty kill, and that may be the reason early on that Marincin makes.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on Marincin because, look, there's no point wasting time on players like that on this podcast going on ad nauseum over and over again about guys who really just aren't making much of an impact. Martin Marinson's not your stalwart defenseman on this team. He's not. They're not passing. No one's passing him the Stanley Cup in June, right? And that's the thing. Like with all these guys doing what they're having to do, everybody's busy logging minutes, zoning in on the opposition's star players. You can't expect a guy like Martin Marincin, who's proved nothing at the NHL level, to be there to offset the good and the bad of one of your marquee prospects in the organization. It just doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, and it just goes back to the idea that this team looks fantastic from afar, but as you microscopically zero in on what's happening with the details of the organization and the way it's put together, guys like that show exactly why the team still has some tinkering to do to fully cover all of the holes that are still a part of the fabric, right, Mike?
No, I was just going to add, role players like Marincin and Freddie Gauthier, you want to limit the negative impact that depth players have, and that's my issue with players like Marincin and Gauthier. I don't see a ton of positives, and there are, I think, a ton of negatives. Now, I think they're both in the same boat where, Gauthier is probably going to make this team because Babcock likes size and because, Gauthier can kill penalties, and he did so last night in Buffalo. So I believe that, those are going to be the sort of ins for them early in the season. But honestly, you could put together a fourth line that I think would be much more effective of, say, Kenny Agostino, Jason Spezza, and Trevor Moore. And that might be the case when Zach Hyman comes back because he'll be added to the penalty kill. But right now, I think Babcock is going to fall back on the guys that he's comfortable with, and that probably means Gauthier up front, and it means Marincin on the blue line.
Freddie Gauthier on the ice last night for a goal. Trevor Moore with the shot, then coming in to score on the rebound while Gauthier obstructed the goaltender, stood in the blue, which is fine. Trevor Moore doing Trevor Moore things. Jason Spezza last night, I thought it was cool to see him in the blue and white just because of his long history tormenting the Maple Leafs, at least in the early part of his career as a member of the Ottawa Senators. Again, it's literally ceremonial. Anyone who thinks that I think that Jason Spezza is going to be a pivotal player in a run towards a Stanley Cup is nuts. Then again, you just never know what kind of spice he has left in his game, and wearing the blue and white, how that motivates him. Where does, legitimately, Mike, where does he fit into this puzzle, considering Freddie Gauthier is still in Mike Babcock's good books, and a guy like Gauthier is someone who would either clear a path for Jason Spezza to play more or essentially be in his way?
Well, the way Babcock is and the way he sounded after the game yesterday and the way that they played together, it sounds as if Gauthier and Spezza will flip-flop on the wing or center on the fourth line to start the season. Babcock has been critical of Spezza. I don't know if that's just using the veteran as motivation for some of the younger players. I think that's part of it. But Steve Simmons, in his column in the Toronto Sun yesterday, indicated that Spezza was a Dubas signing, and that, some of the vitriol, I guess, from Babcock is sort of that, this is a player that I don't really want to play type thing. And I don't know if that's really the case, but I don't doubt Steve Simmons and his sources. So, and we've seen that happen many a time before with Babcock. But in this situation where the Leafs are probably only going to carry 20 or 21 players, if the player makes the team, they're going to play. There's not going to be extra bodies that he can sit like Justin Hall last year. So right now, and I thought Spezza played really good yesterday. He made some won some key faceoffs in the defensive zone. He's very good on faceoffs. He set up Kasperi Kapanen with a nice backhand, a pass from behind the net on a chance I think it was in the third period. So I think in limited minutes, 12, 10, 12 minutes a night that usually a fourth line center gets, he would be effective. It's just a question of whether Babcock will have the confidence to use him in that role.
We're going to take some of your questions in a few minutes. We're also going to add a new segment to the Leafs Convo on Sundays. We're going to take a deeper dive into some pivotal players on this team, or players we hope play pivotal roles in getting the Maple Leafs to where they need to go, and that's to the Stanley Cup final. Victor Olofsson, 2 goals for your Buffalo Sabres last night, Michael. Dumped into the Leafs bench by Jake Muzzin. That was a lot of fun. He had a laugh as he emerged from the bench and then got the last laugh, scoring the big goal to win it.
Yeah, Olofsson is a really good prospect. And ironically, in the second period, you had an exchange of 2 goals from 2 Swedish 7th-round picks, which is not exactly common. Pierre Engvall scoring the goal for Toronto and Olofsson scoring for Buffalo. And I'll tell you, I was impressed with Engvall. I think eventually he's going to be a Leaf. He's big. He's fast. I think right now it's just simply a numbers game, and they can send him down to the Marlies and he can mature more. He played center last year for the Marlies. I think he's an adaptable, big body that eventually will be in the NHL. But yeah, Olofsson is probably going to be a top 6 forward for the Sabres and a good player. But yeah, he got deposited into the bench, the Leaf bench, and it was pretty funny him coming out. He disappeared for a few minutes. They got a rise out of the crowd.
The defense clearly not among the 3 stars last night. A bit of a lapse on that winning goal from Olofsson too. He was just kind of left out there in front of the net, and he ripped it past. Was it Michael Hutchinson to at least score the winner? I was thinking of you, poor Mike, going to see his beloved Leafs at KeyBank Arena, and the Leafs lose in that sort of fashion.
Well, thankfully, I was making my way down from the press box at that point, and I didn't see it live, but I did see it afterward. And yeah, I mean, Muzzin and Barrie after the game said that was sort of a faux pas on their parts, and that during the regular season that's going to happen with less frequency. So more than anything, preseason games are to get the bugs out, get the get the blood flowing, become more familiar with your defensive partner. And that's, with Muzzin and Barrie before this season, they had only played together in a world championship. So, it's time to sort of get used to each other. And that's why probably, today or at the latest tomorrow, the Leafs will cut down to a smaller number and try to get closer to what the lineup will be for the beginning of the regular season.
Muzzin checking Olofsson over the boards like that optically is great. It gives the commentators a laugh. Fans love it. Are we going to see more of that from Jake Muzzin? And I'm not necessarily plowing young prospects on the opposition, but taking apart the rats on the other team. And
honestly, I think with the sort of lack of sandpaper on the Leafs roster, more than likely you're not. I mean, unfortunately, I would like to see Mason Marchment eventually make the NHL. He's a player who, brings that kind of dynamic to the roster. But if you look at what is projected to be the roster for this year, I don't know where your toughness, where your your intimidation in that sense comes from, other than Jake Muzzin and maybe Cody Ceci. So, I think Muzzin will try to throw a big hit every once in a while just to keep opposing forwards on their toes, because they have to be.
Absolutely. We'll get into Tyson Barrie in like 45 seconds, but right now a word from our sponsor.
Nathan Jenner from Oakridge Ford. The month of September means a lot to a lot of people. To us, it's the end of employee pricing, where you pay what we pay at Oakridge Ford. Like a 3-year lease on a 2019 F-150 Lariat with leather and navigation for only $499 per month, plus HST with $0 down. Employee pricing ends on September 30th, but inventory is limited, so get down here quickly. For full details, visit your friends at Oakridge Ford at Oxford and Wonderland, or go to oakridgeford.com.
Yeah, don't forget, employee pricing wraps up September 30th. You can get at me inside the comments section. We have a special code for Leafs Convo listeners that you can use to unlock even more savings beyond employee pricing. It's the Leafs Convo discount. message me for more on that. Tyson Barrie, Mike, I'm really excited about this guy making his debut with the Maple Leafs in preseason play, and then we're going to see him do his thing October 2nd against the Capital Gang. Is he 1A to Morgan Rielly's number 1?
Well, that's yet to be determined, but because Rielly is a leader in that locker room, and I think will still have a monstrous role with this team and will be around after this year. He's got 2 more years left in his contract. You don't want to bring contractual situations into it, but it's very possible that Barrie is simply a 1-year rental. I don't know with their cap situation whether they can re-sign him, especially with some of the deals that have just been signed, like Jared Spurgeon making over $7 million. Barrie is going to be one of those players who comes out in free agency next summer and probably could get $8 million. But in the here and now, he's more than likely going to pair with Muzzin on the second pairing. I wouldn't doubt that pairing gets more ice time or just as much ice time as Rielly and Ceci. What I think is going to be interesting is whether Barrie is the point man on the number 1 power play. He's got a better shot than Morgan Rielly. And maybe they don't want to mess with the continuity of the power play unit, but with Paul McFarland coming in as the coach of the power play and what he did in Florida, I wouldn't doubt a guy like Barrie, who's a good playmaker, a good passer, and has a better shot than Rielly, if he's the quarterback of the first power play with Tavares, Matthews, Marner, and I'm not sure if it'll be Nylander or Andreas Janssen, but when that unit comes together on October 2nd, I have a feeling it's going to be Barrie as the point guy in the number 1, and Rielly will be more assigned to sort of 5-on-5 matchups against top lines than to play a lot of extra time in special
How do you
teams.
think Morgan Rielly feels about that? What would that do to adjust the ascent of Rielly as a premier offensive defenseman, because he's not only came into his own last year, I mean, he was among the best from the blue line producing points. You have to think if he gets less a chance to do that this season, it may benefit the Maple Leafs. And we're going to see how it all plays out. It may benefit the Maple Leafs, but how does that benefit Morgan Rielly?
Well, I think Morgan Rielly's enough of a team player that it's not going to cause any problems. Like I said, he's a mature leader in that locker room. Everybody knows the importance of Morgan Rielly in that team. And, Babcock would be giving him a pretty big role matching up against, say, Jack Eichel in Buffalo or Patrice Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak in Boston. I mean, you want Rielly out there controlling the puck, rushing it up the, and he'll get his points. I think he'll still, he had 70 points last year. I think he would still get 45 to 50 points playing 25 minutes a night, but mostly 5-on-5 and second power play. Barrie is an offensive dynamo. And the thing is, though, is that defensively, he's not as good as Morgan Rielly. He's more, and I'm not attacking Barrie by saying this, he's more like Jake Gardiner, but he doesn't make as many faux pas as Gardner does at key times.
Tyson Barrie, 22 minutes of ice time, just over, against the Sabres at KeyBank Arena on Saturday night. What kind of dude is Mr. Barrie? I mean, is he molding into the kind of player, looking back on his career, that right now would benefit the Maple Leafs in more ways than just producing points on the power play and thrilling us with that big shot?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a little bit of a test yesterday of his character after getting undercut by Rasmus Ristolainen in the third period. It was almost a knee-on-knee hit, and he recovered from it, came off the ice, came back, and continued to play. And after the game, really didn't say anything in terms of whether he thought it was a dirty play. He was very calm about it. I mean, if it was me or if it was other players, I think they would be ready to go to the Sabres locker room and stick down Rasmus Ristolainen's throat. But I think he's a veteran player. He's very confident in his skills, as he should be, because he's a really good offensive player. And I think he will definitely benefit the Leafs this year. That core four of Muzzin, Barrie, Rielly, and Ceci is going to get a lot of work, especially early in the season with Dermott out and with, potentially Sandin and Marinson as the bottom
Geez, it
pairing.
doesn't hurt. More maturity back there, more talent. 1 to 10, how would you grade last year's defensive core? 1 to 10, what number would you put on them?
About a 5.
And this year, when this group is running at peak, where would you put it?
About a 7.5. I think they're much better. They're improved. Now, right now, I'd say they're about a 6.5 because of the bottom pairing. But if Sandin plays the way he has in the preseason and the regular season, and that's asking a lot out of a 19-year-old, then it's probably closer to 7.5. And then Dermott comes back, and I think it'll be solid. It would be very nice to have a solid 6 and not have anybody who you consider a liability. And at times last year, Zaitsev was a liability. Hainsey was, I think, always a liability because of his lack of speed and his age on the top pairing. So there were always, little pitfalls on that blue line. This year, I think there are less. I know the analytics crowd is concerned about Ceci, but so far after 2 games, I know, but so far after 2 games, he looks like a pretty decent defenseman.
Mike, he just has to fulfill a role. This is a different situation for him. Tyson Barrie, a lot is expected of him. Maybe 1 year with the Maple Leafs here. He's a 60-point defenseman. The Leafs, when's the last time they had 2 60-plus point defensemen? This is a great opportunity for him to, emerge even greater than he already has. Whereas with someone like Ceci, just know your role, brother. Just know your role and fulfill your role. You don't have to extend yourself. There's a lot of maturity. There's a lot of talent on that blue line. Sure, it still leaves something to be desired. We'll see if it can actually be fulfilled in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And, Mike, you go from grading the Leafs at a 5 last year, the defense core at a 5 to a 7.5. Tyson Barrie has to take up at least 2 of those points.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic. You see many examples in other sports and in hockey of the player heading to free agency having that big year. I know, like, say when this is with the Buffalo Bills right now, they have a defensive lineman named Shaq Lawson who's going into free agency next year, and he's having what would be considered a career year. He's played really well through a couple games. The Leafs are depending on Tyson Barrie to be motivated to have that big year this year because they'll benefit from it, and then he will benefit from it for next summer. Obviously, if they want to re-sign him, it's going to take some maneuvering from Kyle Dubas to clear cap space to be able to re-sign him. That's why I'm thinking it's probably not going to happen, and they may even concentrate on re-signing Muzzin because Muzzin is a defenseman type that they really don't have plenty of. But for a year, Tyson Barrie will be a big key for this team.
Here for a good time, perhaps not a long time, but we shall see because it is time for the Maple Leafs to take that next step and get past the first round of the playoffs. Back in a sec.
Nathan Jenner from Oakridge Ford. The month of September means a lot to a lot of people. To us, it's the end of employee pricing, where you pay what we pay at Oakridge Ford. Like a 3-year lease on a 2019 F-150 Lariat with leather and navigation for only $499 per month, plus HST with $0 down. Employee pricing ends on September 30th, but inventory is limited, so get down here quickly. For full details, visit your friends at Oakridge Ford at Oxford and Wonderland or go to oakridgeford.com.
Alrighty, Mike, let's wrap up the show with some questions from the listenership. James D. on the community platform, YouTube. What's your biggest concern regarding this team this season? Mine's whether or not we have a backup that will allow Anderson to rest properly. Who is the backup going to be, Michael Hutchinson or Michael Neuvirth?
Well, it's tough to make a determination on Neuvirth right now after playing only 2 periods. Did he play well last night? Yes, but he really didn't get challenged that much. There weren't many difficult saves. I thought Hutchinson in the 3rd period faced more chances, and Babcock had problems not with Hutchinson but with the defense on the 2 goals, the breakaway goal by Jimmy Vesey and then the goal by Olofsson. So if I had to say right now, because Neuwirth is on a PTO and he's not under contract, and if they signed him to a contract, that would be contract number 50. I think it's good. I think it's going to be Hutchinson. But if Neuwirth plays another good game and they're confident that he is healthy, then maybe they sign him. I think the sort of fallback is maybe Neuwirth signs an AHL contract for, say, a month or so, as they get a better idea of whether he can stay healthy and play. And if he's open to that, then maybe that's the way to go, because then he won't count against the 50 contracts. But I think it's going to be one of those two. I know that yesterday Louis Domingue was on waivers from Tampa Bay, and nobody picked him up because his salary, even though he went 21-5 last year, he's got an over $1 million salary, and nobody picked him up. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Garrett Sparks was placed on waivers too.
Yeah, poor Garrett Sparks. I have plenty of pathos for that young man. I really do. Doesn't it make sense for Camp Neuwirth just to be healthy, play somewhere, contribute, show that he's available night in and night out? And if the Leafs need him at some point, he can be brought up? Or is this idea of signing an AHL contract for any length of time just too much of a hit to the ego for a guy, who has run some game for some key teams in the NHL?
Well, I don't think that playing in 2 preseason games, and he's played 1 so far, so I would think he's going to play at least 1 more, maybe 2, so that would be up to 3, is not enough of a resume to make a decision on the backup goaltender. If he accepts, now I talked to somebody who covered him in Philadelphia last year and says they would doubt that he would take an AHL contract, but they could sign him to a PTO, as they did a few years ago. If you remember Kari Ramo, when they were going through the backup situation with Jonas Enroth, and then eventually it got to McElhaney. Kari Ramo came in and signed a PTO and played some games with the Marlies. I wouldn't doubt that that's a possibility, just so they can get a more of a resume of him playing games and seeing if he is ready to go.
Hey, converts, OGs, we are looking for a little bit of Twitter help to run the Leafs Convo account during game nights. If you're interested, reach out to me in the comments section. You can DM me on Twitter at I am Norman James, or at the Leafs Convo. Robert James on Twitter. Can this team win in the playoffs with a skill speed only component? Seems like other teams have already found a way to play against them physically. We're already thinking ahead, Mike, but you have to be thinking about the championship when you think about the preseason, because you're playing now so that you can play then.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why Babcock is fixated on the size situation. Not that Freddie Gauthier is going to be the determining factor between making or missing, or making or advancing in the playoffs. I think it is the reason why they brought in a player like Mikheyev, who's a big body, who has some skill. I was impressed with what he did on Friday against the Sabres. He's going to be a third-line guy. But, what it's going to be is the skill players on this team being able to fight through things that other teams do in the playoffs. It's going to be the maturation of Matthews, of Marner, of Nylander, of the younger defense, and whether they can stand the heat of the postseason. Now, they've had mixed success over the last few years. They're going to need to fight through it and succeed, and that's going to be the determining factor, not whether they have one guy who can stick up for the rest of them.
Babcock, for as staunch and stubborn as he is, and you think he'd be a skeptic, he seems to put a lot of trust and expectation in guys who really haven't come through for him.
Well, I mean, in the playoffs against Boston last year, that fourth line, the players that made the most impact were the 2 sort of water bug wingers in Tyler Ennis and Trevor Moore. They were energetic. They were effective. Gauthier was just sort of there. It's like when you have a player who you can say, well, he doesn't make mistakes. Well, that's not, to me, that's sort of a waste, because you want. Yeah, well, I mean, ideally, that's what Gauthier would be, is somebody who doesn't make mistakes, who wins faceoffs, who plays well defensively. But what does he provide at the other end of the ice? He doesn't provide anything. So that's why I think it's sort of an empty space on this roster, and that's why I don't see any bad side to playing Jason Spezza up the middle. And I don't think Gauthier is an effective winger. I think there are a lot of other effective wingers, more and better than Gauthier. But I think to start the season, that's where he's probably going to end up.
Does Jason Spezza ride out this entire season?
Yes, if he maintains the level of effort and that he has shown so far. If he drops off, that'll give Babcock, the evidence to say, I can't play this guy. But I think he's playing well so far. He's obviously still has something from that franchise player that was there with Ottawa and Dallas. He's just older, slower, but he still got it, at least from what I've seen. So I think he'll
Yeah, I'm just wondering, does the idea of this guy wearing the blue and white this season become a contentious one? Does he represent the ongoing struggle that is Dubas versus Babcock? And any idea of effort and a player of his age and this opportunity has to result, or has to be, generate expectation of premium effort. When this, any kind of notion that the effort would dip, to me, would lead me to believe that he's just getting tired and can't keep up anymore. But to not put in the effort when given this opportunity would make absolutely zero sense. Last question from R. Morel on the community platform. If the Leafs can get out of the first round of the playoffs, should that be enough to keep us satisfied? No. We know that getting out of the first round is a huge deal for this team, and one that it has not been able to accomplish, at least in this new era of competitiveness and Boston being the obstruction. But no, this team's got to start taking runs at Stanley Cups. And anyone who thinks that, it's just a process with these guys, 1 year at a time, is going to realize that the years evaporate quick, they pile up even faster, and you could be left with a whole lot of nothing here in the very near future. So get right after it. Last word to you, Mike.
I think that this is a pivotal year for Mike Babcock. I think that he absolutely has to get out of the first round to keep his job. 5 seasons with 4 of them being first round exits, I do not think will fly. You've got Sheldon Keefe waiting in the wings. And if there is not some success after a changeover in the roster that you've seen this year, unless there's some sort of catastrophic injury where, Matthews and Tavares are out and they lose in the first round, I think that's the exception. But if they don't advance, I don't think Mike Babcock.
The regular season begins with the Senators at Scotiabank Arena. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Thanks, Norman.